Welcome to One on One. I am your host, Jimmy Olsen, and joining me today, he is the author of the book Brand Width. He also is a co-host of the podcast Brand Width on Demand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me, Kipper McGee. How are you, sir?
Jimmy, the most famous name in central Iowa.
That's right, or wherever else I can make it up. Because I was listening to one of your podcasts, and you had John Tesh on there, and he asked Walter Cronkite how to say something. It's however I say it. I'm like, so whatever I say, it's truth, right?
That's how it works.
Well, Kipper, one of the reasons why I was wanting to bring you on my show to talk about, because there's so many things that are going on right now that are affecting people in many different ways. And one of those, we're seeing it in broadcasting with radio and TV, but not just there, but across the board with many different occupations of people, losing jobs. In fact, I was just reading an article a couple of weeks ago how there was a company that they had, numerous people on furlough, and then they just said, you know what, you're done. And so all of a sudden they have lost their jobs. And this is something in radio we've been talking about for years, but I know talking with a lot of people that do resume writing and even trying to help people when they're learning to do interviews when they are looking for a job, it's that brand. Who are you? What can you do for me? What is that work? And like I said, we've been doing this in radio for years. And now I think it's just a very important thing to really share with other people to help them be the best that they can be as they're taking that step out. So kind of give us the quick 10,000 foot view of the brand, and then we'll kind of dig into it.
Okay. Well, probably distilled to the simplest parts, a brand is simply what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? That's what you are. It's what you're known for, what you're famous for. And all the other stuff is nice. It's good window dressing. There's a lot of theory, but the reality is, what do people think about you? And there are those who will say things like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, the reality is that when you're running a, $6, $8, $20 billion company, or even like a $5 million radio station, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to hire somebody just because they're a friend of yours. You're going to hire, though, of two equally qualified people, and one, you worked with them, you know what they can do, and the other one on paper looks good and gets good references, you probably will lean to the one you've worked with just because you've got that comfort zone and that history. But the reality is we need to market ourselves for whatever the situation is, and we still have to stand out among other people, because even if they know you, they probably know 10 other people too.
So really, it's that melding of it together. Like you said, it's not the what you know, it's who you know. It really is, it's the what you know, and it is the who you know. It's those two pieces together.
Or put another way, it's who knows what you know.
Right. Which goes back to the point of how important it is. And a lot of people, and we'll be honest, there's certain occupations that it's not always easy to meet people, but it's great to make sure you're networking and getting to know other people in what it is that you do in your occupation. So it's basically building that tool belt of acquaintances or people that you kind of talk to, maybe not on a regular basis, but at least when something happens, you can reach out. So they at least know who you are, or they are familiar with you.
Absolutely. It could not be said better than this. Life is a contact sport.
Absolutely. And it's the more contacts you have, the better that you can do as you're moving yourself along. And again, if something happens, sometimes even with those contacts, you might have been doing something for 5, 10, 15 years. You all of a sudden lose your job. Maybe there's a contact for another opportunity that's even maybe a little different, but even better.
Yeah. And that's one thing I think, since computerization, so many different jobs have become really loaded with transferable skills. Mm-hmm. So for someone who, was in radio, Well, gosh, they can go into marketing, they can go into promotions, they can probably go into sales if they're so inclined. But there are a lot of things that use the same skills that a radio show or a radio person would use in daily life. And the same is true of many other occupations as well, whether it's data entry or transcription or, you name it, manufacturing. Some of the coolest things you see on Shark Tank are done by people who are astrophysicists futzing around in their basement.
You're listening to One on One. I'm your host, Jimmy Olsen. We're chatting with Kipper McGee, the author of Brandwidth. Also, he is a branding consultant for people, and kind of getting that idea with that brand piece, trying to figure things out. Again, like you said, it's that life being the contact sport. Who are your contacts? How many contacts do you have? I mean, what are the key pieces or key places that you even would suggest for people to start finding those, especially if you're, say, in a business that it's not like you're going out and shaking hands every day and meeting people?
Well, yeah, especially now in our COVID-thon, there's no way that we're doing that. But you're absolutely right. And probably the biggest thing that's out there right now is LinkedIn. That has really become the go-to place for anything business-oriented. And that means having a smart, good profile. And if people are not sure what that is, man, there's a lot of stuff online. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube showing what makes a good profile. But it always starts with not where you've been and not what you've done, but what skills you've got. And then another thing that really does make a difference, to your point about, knowing people, is the recommendations that you get that people see right away. Well, Jimmy's been a great, on-air talent for years. He's a great host, good MC, does commercial, those kind of things. The more of that that's on your LinkedIn profile, that's where people are going to probably look first these days when they start shopping for somebody to hire.
Well, and it's not that the whole contact thing is a new concept, because, it's been around forever. We've heard there's books about in the 50s and 60s, or, even, of getting out there and meeting people. But what we're finding even more online, because of when you're applying for jobs, you're not going into the office to drop off that resume anymore, or going into an office to fill out the application. You have to do it online. So you're not getting that face-to-face or that engagement when you are out there looking, which I think almost makes it even stronger. It really comes to who that can help you when you're looking.
It does. But there are going to be times when you are making kind of that cold introduction. And one of the little secrets that a lot of people don't realize is that these days, most times, a human only ever sees like the top 5% of qualifications.
Absolutely.
The qualifications are based on search words that are put in the job description, and then they just do a filtering. It's all artificial intelligence that's reading those resumes. So again, somebody who puts in that they've been doing XYZ job for 20 years, it's not going to stand out as much as if they've got skills. And it doesn't hurt to tailor those skills to the specific job you're going for. That can be a little bit tedious if you're blanketing the world, but to have a certain resume if you're going after a marketing job versus going after an HR job or maybe a PR job, that you've got different things in there. Even though it's the same basic information, it's the same facts, but different emphasis.
Yeah, and they say that a lot. When it comes to the cover letters, you have to write a cover letter for each position that you're applying for. You then almost need to rewrite that resume for each job that you are looking for as well, because it's really tailoring it down and being specific for that, and telling the story of your brand. Who are you? What do you know? What do you do? What do you excel at? What are you going to do for me if I talk to you?
And utilizing words that are actually in the job description is another little trick that doesn't hurt, both in the cover letter and in your resume. For example, in radio, if someone is looking for ratings performance, make sure that you talk about your ratings performance. If they say metric measurement, make sure you talk about metric measurement. Same thing, differently expressed.
Right. We are chatting with Kipper McGee. He is the author of Brand With, also a branding coach, and you're listening to One-on-One. I am your host, Jimmy Olson. So, with that of getting out there and, of course, blanketing the world to try and find that next position, I almost want to go into another piece here because we hear this a lot, and just with living life and watching how it affects and helps people sometimes and it doesn't. They're always talking about getting out there, making a name for yourself, work against the grain, really be that go-getter, which yes, it's happened. We see the proof in that in history as people have worked their way up the ladder. But is there another piece to that because it can also, if you're not careful, kind of bite you a little bit and it could hurt you? Is it more of a right place at the right time? I mean, explain that a little more.
Here is the difference is there are people who do stuff because they want to do it or they want to make a name for themselves or because they just enjoy it. And then there are those who do the same thing, but they do it because it's going to help make their boss look good. It's going to be something that's going to help advance the overall goals of the organization. And sometimes, it's doing the same thing, but it's how you market it internally. So, that it's not that you're putting in an all-nighter because you want to make the perfect production piece, but that you're working on this because you want the station to be represented the best it can be. And just that simple little nuance of how you describe it, both to your bosses and to others, is going to make all the difference in the world. Because everybody wants a team player and everybody wants somebody who's going to give the extra mile and do what it takes to make things right. But also, they're looking at why. What's your motivation? Simon Sinek, what is your why? And the reality is that some people come off as they're doing it all for themselves just to, stand out in the crowd. And the reality is that if, it's like any team sport. I mean, you take Tom Brady. Well, yeah, he's a great quarterback, and he made that team in New England for quite some time. We'll see how he does now. But the reality is that he was always talking about how it's helping the coach, how it's helping the team. And he, if anything, kind of undersold his personal contribution.
But then even underselling it still worked out very well for him to be very successful and kind of created and paved a way for him. And sometimes, I mean, I think when it just deals with it, people can love you and you're doing a great job. And sometimes it's just that whole bean counter piece just bites you. It doesn't matter how well you've done. You just happen to be the luck of the draw to be the luck of the out.
Well, and especially these days, because so many people, when faced with economic struggles like we're going through right now with the pandemic, man, they just start at the top of the payroll, and the more zeros after your name, the sooner you get cut. And that's really, I mean, if you think about it, that's probably the stupidest thing somebody can do. And yet people do it every single day in every single category.
And I think in some ways, even though they know you on a local level in your position, it's also trying to figure out to make sure that they know you on a corporate level a little bit as well, because maybe everyone loves you where you are and in your office, and you are the grease that's helping those wheels turning, and they know how important you are because you're doing such a great job. Right. For whatever reason, if corporate doesn't know you and corporate doesn't understand what you do and who you are, it really doesn't matter.
No, and the sad reality is that if you get one or two people removed from yourself beyond those that you personally know, you become a name on a spreadsheet, and they just start looking at cost oftentimes. And they just figure, hey, if I can get one person for $100,000 or two people for 50 or four for 25, what's the better answer? And again, this is where sometimes people understand what I call the Kovan situation, the Kovan trap, the cost of everything, but the value of nothing.
And we're seeing that more and more every day, and it really does not matter what industry you're in. I mean, even when we're looking at the history of the auto industry, of how robots came in, and now even artificial intelligence coming in and taking jobs because they're automating everything. And, radio has seen it. And I'm not sure if there's, again, an industry that's not felt the crunch of that.
Oh, absolutely. And in fairness, I think there is a difference to using technology to advantage because, take radio, okay? We used to hire people to sit in a room for 4 minutes, push a button, wait 4 minutes, talk, wait 4 minutes. So does it make more sense to let them spend some time in the studio and put those tracks in and do it in advance? And the question becomes how well they do it and how well they're prepped for it. But it's still, to the consumer, it can be just as effective. However, you never want to be in a situation like, and this happened back at the turn of the last century, where people were saying, well, you're bringing those darn steam shovels, you're putting out of work 100 people with shovels. True. But the shovels were putting out of work 1,000 people with teaspoons. So where do you draw the line? And the trick, I think, is to realize where the technology can help us and help us make it better, and then just learn how to do it. An old saying is that the person who knows how will usually have a job. The person who knows why will usually be a boss. And that is where you want to be.
Absolutely. I mean, again, as you're just trying to make that way through wherever you are, it's all about being innovative. And I know I've been accused many years ago of being a sponge because I just want information. I want to learn. I want to understand. I mean, I got in trouble when I was a child because, my mom and dad had a record player. Yeah, surprise, right? So they had a record player. And, well, I found a screwdriver. I took the record player apart because I wanted to know how it worked. I was like 3, 4, 5 years old when I did this. But
did you put it back together?
I don't know. My dad never finished the rest of the story, and I'm sure the end of that story is I was not feeling very well on my backside.
Yeah, because man, I could take stuff apart all day, but I could never get it back together.
But I mean, that's really what it is. It's understanding. It's knowing what it is. And I mean, I think a lot of times, a good manager, it's not saying that you know exactly how to do this job, but you at least have an understanding about the area that you're in, so you can have a decent conversation. Or if there are problems happening, I mean, like with me, I want to know, because if I am calling an engineer with a problem, I'm able to kind of explain it better and being able to talk in his lingo.
Right.
Rather than, driving into to see the mechanic and go, yeah, my car's going boom, boom, clug, clug, chunk, chunk.
Right.
Okay. Can you give me more
value? That's part of the value proposition that someone on a spreadsheet five positions away from you will never know, but is most absolutely true.
Absolutely. Again, chatting with Kipper McGee. He is the author of the book Brand With. Now, Kipper, where can they find your book?
It's available. The Kindle is available actually on Amazon, just under Brandwidth. And the subtitle is How Big Broadcasting is Missing the Mediamorphosis. Or they can simply go Google it, Brandwidth book, and the publisher's Eckhartz Press. And that's ECKHARTZ progress.
And then, of course, you also have the podcast that you do with a friend of yours called Brandwidth On Demand, which they can pretty much find anywhere.
It is available wherever better podcasts would be sold if they were sold, but they aren't, so they're free.
Which is fantastic. Kipper, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure talking with you, my friend.
Well, you too. Stay away from those phone booths.
Again, you've been listening to One-on-One. I'm your host, Jimmy Olsen. And if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and anyone else. You can always follow along as well by listening to this podcast and many more through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, and you could even subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is My Buddy Jimmy 101, and you could find the podcast on Spreaker.